Today's video, what to do about Jordan Peterson. Actually, what am I to do about all of these black cockatoos in my path? Hello guys. Hello. Why I'm negative. Back to the story, because I've got a story to tell you. So I've got some top tips on writing and that. If you are studying an undergraduate degree in something, I encourage you to think critically. It helps people like me stop doing stupid things. Yeah, Jordan Peterson. Just going to give you some of my initial thoughts just now. Lots of people have expressed their thoughts about him. But I just wanted to share a few of mine. And I'll put together something a bit more coherent later on, because I really need to sit down and put this down on paper, because it's quite complicated. I forgot to bring my lapel microphone, my lavalier microphone, but I'm just using the action camera today rather than the weird camera I was using the other day that had that little planet effect. Apologies for that. I think it was a bit distracting. It's the first time I used it and I got a little carried away with it, and I suspect I gave away a little bit of the magic to it by overusing it. Anyways, usually I'm distracted, so let's get back to the topic of the conversation. So there's Jordan Peterson. Oops. The camera nearly fell off selfie stick. Jordan Peterson is this clinical psychologist from Canada. He is all over social media at the moment, particularly YouTube. So that's where I see a lot of his videos. It's kind of messed up all my search algorithms now, because I've been watching his videos and now it looks as though I'm a fan of right-wing politics, because I'm getting lots of videos from right-wing groups at the moment. That's one of the problems. Jordan Peterson's work has been rather celebrated by some people in the right, not everyone, but he has become associated with the alt-right because many of the views that he expresses are ones that extreme right groups are sympathetic to. Not all of them, or not all, they're not sympathetic to all of his views, but he's more popular amongst the right than the left. He's also the psychologist who became famous, really, when he said he wouldn't abide by new laws in Canada that prescribe the use of non-gendered pronouns. This is in relation to transsexual people, largely. So you don't use gendered pronouns because those don't apply to everyone. And Jordan Peterson saw this was an infringement on his freedom of speech. It was prescribed speech or mandated speech. He believes that there is no patriarchal oppression of women and has never been. He believes that the differences that you see in terms of differential in pay and occupational status and differences in representation in positions of power, he sees those things as being a consequence of differential competence between men and women. He believes that men just tend to work longer hours and be more committed to their careers than women. He also believes there's a link between race and IQ, that black people are genetically different from white people, and one of those differences is in their genetics. I have to go out, someone's cutting grass. I'll just walk past him and then we'll talk some more. Right, I'm going to continue even though there's a leaf blower over there which may drown me out. Isn't it typical that I'm being drowned out by the noises of humanity trying to tame nature, cutting nature back. I'm discussing the work of Jordan Peterson, evolutionary psychologist. He says we are little else but the product of nature. Our behaviours are determined largely by our biology. So, anyway, sorry, get back to the point. So one of the arguments he makes, that I've covered in a previous video, is the link between race and IQ, known as race science. Right. So what he will say, and what he has said, is that intelligence is genetic and it is heritable and immutable, and black people have less of it than white people, i.e. your level of intelligence is determined by your genetic makeup, and black people have a different genetic makeup to white people, and one of those differences is in a lack of capacity to develop high level intelligence. It's kind of what he's saying. So you see, he's a biological determinist in many regards. He does talk about the nuance of social environment, but largely believes that much of human behaviour and experience can be explained at the biological level. So he's against feminism, he's against the Me Too movement, he finds that abhorrent, and his work is very popular among young white men, and probably because what Jordan is saying is that young white men should not be burdened by this accusation of white male privilege, that white male privilege doesn't exist. It's just a reflection of the natural and biological differences between white people and black people, and between men and women. So he says that there is nothing oppressive about that, it's just a reflection of the variance in competence, so that white men, or white boys in particular, have no guilt, have no privilege. They're just competent and shouldn't have to suffer from this white male guilt. So you can see it's popular among some young white men, but not all young white men find this stuff palatable. But anyway, Jordan is also particularly hostile towards Marxism and social constructionism and identity politics, all forms of identity politics. Now here's the interesting thing. For Jordan Peterson, we should be treated as individuals. It's wrong to treat us on the basis of our group membership, our social identity. So you shouldn't treat men any differently from women. You should treat them purely on the basis of their competence to do a job or to do a task, or on the value of their contribution, potential contribution they can make. So it's all competence based. So he says that we shouldn't relate to people on the basis of their identity, social identity, or group identity, but relate to them purely as individuals. And the problem is, when you see Jordan Peterson talk, he appears to do little else other than group people into particular social categories. And then he does some rather ugly things to them as a consequence. More about that after I get my coffee. Right, back to it. I've got my cup of coffee. Got to get your priorities right, And I'm not going to be able to save psychology from its own impulses of model self-destruction unless I have a cup of coffee in the end. But let's get back to that topic. And Jordan Peterson. Where was I? Oh yes. Jordan Peterson, he is very much about treating people as individuals rather than as members of a group, yet in his style of arguing, he will often construct social groups and place people in those groups and then use that placement as a disparagement of their views. And he typically does this when people disagree with his view of things. And if he ever watches my video, he may do that to me too. So what you'll find is that among the groups that he allocates his critics to are neo-Marxists, social constructionists, left-wing ideologues. He uses that a lot. He says he can just sniff out very quickly if someone's a left-wing ideologue. And he uses the term what's the term? Virtue signaler. This is a term that was coined, well, I don't know if it was exactly coined, but it started to be used quite a lot, like 4 or 5 years ago. It's used a lot in, it has a specific meaning, I think, in evolutionary psychology. It refers to people who signal, who apparently are supposed to be signaling that they're morally good people by putting on a display, i.e. saying something or adopting a particular viewpoint. And this is a signal that they're morally virtuous people, but there's no substance behind the signal, you know, that they're not either making no personal sacrifice for the moral position that they're adopting, or they have no substantive arguments behind the position that they're adopting. But yeah, it comes from evolutionary psychology, like peacocks, you know, the display of the male peacock, which is this glorious thing that makes a peacock look very attractive to the peahen, but might actually just be a trick. There may be nothing of substance behind it. It might not be that that peacock is a healthy specimen and a good breeder. The peacock might have bad genes, but a nice tail. So it's that virtue signaling. He uses that, yeah, he uses that a lot. So with some people who disagree with him, what I'll say is that one phrase I remember him using on one video was the demonic chatterings of virtue seekers. Sorry, virtue signalers. But typically, yeah, he'll allocate people to that kind of arbitrary group that he's constructed for himself. Not for himself, for his own purpose. Or he'll label people left-wing ideologues. Hey, so he uses these labels like you're Marxist, you're a left-wing ideologue, or you're a virtue signaler, to dismiss the arguments against his position. So he actually puts people into groups. And this is what I think he misunderstands about identity politics. That he's replicating the whole process that led to the sort of identity politics that we have now. Take black people, for example. Black people didn't suddenly just decide, oh, we're black, we want to be recognized as different from white people based on our skin pigmentation, because our skin pigmentation is really important to us. So we want it to be made known and very clear that we are a very different group to white people. That's kind of not how it worked. Black people got labelled black by white people. It was white people who decided that skin pigmentation was a sufficient difference to enable certain groups of people to be categorized as in a different racial group from white people. And then attached to that concept of racial group with a whole load of pejorative evaluations of people's capacities. So black people were seen as sexually uninhibited in a bad way, but also of having low levels of intelligence. So the category black was largely a category that was imposed upon black people by white people, and it was largely done through to help administer systems like slavery. So under slavery, certain human beings were viewed as commodities who could be bought and sold. And an important administrative task in that system is to be able to identify which people can be bought and sold. They have to be distinct enough from the people that we don't consider should be bought and sold. So we get the category black. So it's a category imposed by the power elite on the non-powerful in order for the powerful to gain some sort of advantage. So that's really identity politics, you know, and now the people who haven't got power have started to seize power, have started to rally around the identities that were imposed upon them and started to take control over how those identities were used to administer their lives, to change the cultural value that were attached to those identities. And now the kickback against identity politics seems to be being made by the very group of people who invented it. And it seems the kickback is largely as a result of the people who created the notion of identity politics in terms of separate racial groups. Now are kicking back because they're not in control of how those groups are managed anymore. Anyway, just a view, just a point of view. I think it's worth thinking about. So, there's a very large, creepy, crawly thing. What were you? Were you a gecko? In which case, I classify you as cute. But if you are a spider, I'm really sorry, but I've arbitrarily categorized you as not cute. Right, whatever. Distracted. Oh God, I've assimilated well to life in Australia, haven't I? Right, whatever thing appeared on this table was running in the opposite direction from where I'm sitting, and I'm presuming that's a good sign. Anyway, let's carry on. Let's carry on. I'm going to put the camera over there. You are now the barrier against whatever it was that was running at me from over there. So, Jordan Peterson is constructing categories of groups, of identities, and allocating people in them so that they can be, their arguments against him can be effectively managed by him. They can be disparaged just by the virtue of being put into a group. So that's troubling. The other thing that's troubling is that he's kind of a firebrand academic who is sort of putting himself out there in terms of freedom of speech, you know, saying that you cannot curtail my freedom of speech. He started off with that thing about pronouns, saying you can't tell me what pronouns to use. That's an incursion on my freedom of speech. And he's extended that to people who object to his views on issues around race and gender. And there's a capricious quality to this. He's constantly contradicting his own viewpoint, because at one end he's saying that he believes in freedom of speech, but he engages in this kind of social process of putting into groups that he pejoratively labels in order to be able to dismiss the views of those groups where those groups are challenging his views, you know. But he's also turning to the legal system to actually threaten to sue people who say bad things about them. Particularly, I don't know if this is irony or not, but particularly when groups are doing their own kind of job of sticking him in a group in order to disparage him, i.e. associating him as alt-right, or describing him as a misogynist, or I know that someone described him as a misogynist on Twitter. And Jordan Peterson kind of said something along the lines, paraphrasing now, don't sue me, Jordan, something along the lines of, I'm going to sue you unless you retract that and apologise. And this poor academic went back on Twitter saying, okay, I've been threatened by Jordan Peterson, he's going to sue me, so I'm apologising for calling him a misogynist. Something like that. Anyway, I think someone else might have been threatened with being sued by Jordan Peterson for calling Jordan Peterson something like a Nazi. It's not surprising, really. I mean, no one really particularly likes being called a Nazi. You can see why you'd take offence at that, unless you are a neo-Nazi, in which case it would be a somewhat of a compliment. But Jordan Peterson doesn't appreciate being called a Nazi. He takes offence. He jumps off the bandwagon of this fighting against political correctness. You know, we have the right to offend people by speaking freely. He suddenly jettisons all of that because he's now been called a Nazi. Now he's offended because someone's called him a name that he doesn't like, and he threatens to sue. The reason people call him a Nazi is because his stuff on IQ and genetics and black people, that's race science, and this stuff was is the stuff of the Nazi Party. This is the stuff that was behind the Holocaust. This is the stuff of eugenics. And he's basically expressing those same views. So it's no wonder people are saying these things. Oh, and if you're watching, Jordan, I don't think you're a Nazi. I think you're a very nice man. Very nice man. He's got millions in the bank account, apparently. So yeah, you're a very nice man. But you can kind of see why some people might say what they say. And the reason why race science is discredited, sorry, I probably went on about this in another video, but it really it engages my passion, this stuff. The reason why that stuff's discredited is that it operationalizes on the basis of a biological category of race. You know, they're making biological arguments that black people are less intelligent than white people. And that's premised on this notion that race is a biological variable. It isn't. It isn't. Biologists and geneticists have shown that it's not a biological variable. You can't differentiate between people based on their biology in order to assign a racial category. This makes no sense. So it's discredited, you know, it's just bunk. But he's reviving those views, or either intentionally or unintentionally. Anyway, he's getting called these nasty names. He goes and threatens to sue people, and you kind of think, well, hold on, where's your thing about freedom of speech there? The thing about suing, when someone's got a lot of money and they go threatening to sue people for libel or slander, it has a chilling effect. You know, it stops other people speaking in a certain way about that person. So ever since I heard that people were threatened with being sued by Jordan, I kind of thought, oh God, I've got to rail my stuff in. Maybe I shouldn't make this YouTube video at all. Maybe I should just stay well away. And some people use the threat of libel to instill that chilling effect, to stop freedom of speech, stop people saying what they might have a predilection. I was trying to use a fancy word there. It has a chilling effect. It stops people saying what they want to say. I don't know what to say about that other than, look, you're sending out a message to saying black people are less intelligent than white people, and women have levels of competence that can explain why they're less represented in certain occupational groups and less represented in positions of power. You know, no matter how rich your vocabulary is to enable you to say that in a way that might disguise how hurtful it is to say those things, that no matter how you dress it up, that's awful. That's an awful point of view, and you need to be damn sure of your science before you make such claims, and you can't be damn sure of your science. You seem damn sure of your science, but it seems you are quite selective in terms of the evidence you cite. Oh, this video is turning out to be way too long. I'm going to have to, if I can try and edit this stuff, excuse me, try to edit this down, I'll edit it down. But, it's preoccupying me, this thing about what Jordan Peterson is saying and doing. It really is preoccupying me. And it threatens me. I'm going to lose my 21... I've got 21 subscribers. If you're one of the subscribers,
I love you. Thank you. Thank you for being a subscriber. I love you in a platonic sense. Oh, and if you're a student on one of my courses, I love you within professional boundaries. I only operate within the staff code of conduct. Incidentally, there is a suggestion that, well, at least someone thought that Jordan Peterson may have overstepped his own professional boundaries in his works with his clients as a clinical psychologist because he was faced with an allegation of professional misconduct. Best not say too much about that because those things are kept confidential and you only get the vaguest of detail on what the complaint was. But it seems to have been settled in something other than the client apologising for saying nasty things about Jordan without reason. See what I mean? Jordan. Georgia, always on my mind. Isn't that a song? Oh, I'm really drifting now. Okay, I should pretty much end it there, really. So I'll summarise, because I went all over the place. Basically, Jordan Peterson says that we should treat people as individuals rather than treat them on the basis of their group identity, and that's his stance against identity politics. He said you shouldn't treat people differently because they're a woman or a black person. You just treat them purely on the basis of their competence. And what I'm saying is, and I could get into all the arguments about how the measures of competence are skewed and all the research he cites is cherry-picked to support his arguments, but leave that alone. When he says that you should only treat people as individuals, not as members of groups, he has this rhetorical device that he uses, which is to position people into groups in order to disparage them en masse. He groups those with whom he disagrees into a particular group that he then uses as a means to disparage their views. I.e., they're all a bunch of Marxist, fanatical, left-wing ideologues and virtue signalers. So that's the first problem. The second problem is, I suppose the last thing I really said about, he puts himself forward as a strong advocate for freedom of speech, but doesn't seem at all worried or reticent. It appears he doesn't seem too reticent to threaten to sue people with whom he has a disagreement, particularly when they say things about him that he doesn't like. And this is a group this is an individual. Jordan is happy, well, maybe he's not happy, but he engages in the practice of saying pretty nasty things about a whole group of people, 50% of the world's population. He says particularly dreadful things about women in terms of, you haven't been oppressed, you're just not that competent at the jobs where people get the big bucks and the power. So I find that problematic. Anyway, I should stop there. Oh, Jordan, what are you doing? So, I'm going to put this down in maybe a paper. I don't know why I'd write a paper. Less people read papers than will watch my YouTube channel. And people don't read academic papers. We publish in academic journals because that's what we have to do to keep our jobs and to secure advancement in our jobs. People aren't reading academic papers. I can back that up with an academic paper, actually. No one's read. If you want me to back that up, then I will. But I'm thinking of writing something. So if you've got comments, just write them down in the box below. And let me know where I've gone wrong on this stuff, where I'm being flimsy, where I'm being unfair, where I'm not really thinking properly on it. And then what I'll do, I'll just nick your ideas and then incorporate them in my writing and gain the social credit for it. Only partially joking. I will, of course, if you want me to. Give you credit if you feed me an idea that's a cracker and I include it, then of course I'm going to acknowledge it. But you do have to give me permission. You know, if you want just to give me anonymous feedback, you can do that too. Okay, enough about Jordan for now, but maybe another video about Jordan at another time. Meantime, I'll try and put a link into these two young white guys who are reading Jordan's 12 Rules for Living. I think that's what it's called. Antidote to Chaos. I think the Antidote to Chaos, I think that's the subtitle. So it's an interesting subtitle because he associates chaos with the symbol of femininity. He says chaos symbolizes femininity. So in some ways, one might suspect that he had a desire to subtitle his book An Antidote Against Women. Oh, of course, Jordan, if you're watching this, and if you hear about this, I think you're a lovely man. I think you love women in an appropriate, socially and morally sanctioned way. Please don't sue me, fella. Please don't sue me. Till next time. Ta-ra.